It was 7:02 a.m. The streets of Crest Hill were quiet. Clean sidewalks, trimmed hedges, mailboxes painted to match front doors. Malcolm Hayes walked alone, hands in his pockets, tailored slacks, navy coat, leather shoes clicking softly against the pavement. Nothing flashy, just dignified. He was headed to City Hall for a finance committee meeting, one of the many responsibilities he carried as mayor of Crest Hill. But he didn't bring a security detail, didn't need an escort. Malcolm believed in walking his city, feeling its pulse. He believed in being present. As he passed a large white house with a red flag flapping from the porch, a police SUV rolled slowly around the corner. Malcolm barely noticed, until it pulled over. And didn't move. Officer Bradley watched from inside the vehicle. White, mid-40s, stern jaw, aviators, one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on his holster. Something about the man walking made him uneasy. Too calm, too confident. Didn't recognize him. Wrong neighborhood, he tapped his dash cam, turned it on, then opened the door and stepped out. "Sir, can I talk to you for a second?" Malcolm turned, offered a polite nod. "Of course, officer. Everything." "All right." Bradley didn't smile. "What brings you to this neighborhood this morning?" Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "I live 5 blocks from here. I'm walking to work." "And where's work?" Malcolm kept his voice calm. "City Hall." "That..." Zuli Bradley stepped closer. "Got any ID on you?" Malcolm reached slowly into his coat pocket, pulled out a wallet, handed over his license. Bradley looked it over. His expression didn't change. "Huh. Malcolm Hayes. Never heard of you." Malcolm smiled faintly. "You should read the local paper. Sometime." Bradley frowned. "You always this mouthy, or just when you're out casing houses?" Malcolm's smile faded. "Excuse me?" "We've had reports of car break-ins around here." "You fit a description." Malcolm's voice dropped. To a quiet, even tone. "What description is that?" "Tall, black, walking alone." There it was, just loud enough to sting. "Officer, you've made a mistake." "We'll see about that." Bradley turned Malcolm around. "Hands behind your back." Click, click. Cuffs snapped around Malcolm's wrists. Just like that. A jogger. Across the street stopped in confusion. A woman peeked through her curtain. Bradley led Malcolm toward the squad car like a trophy. No Miranda rights. No explanation. Just assumption. As Malcolm slid into the back seat, he looked out the window and whispered, "You have no idea who I am. But you will." Music drops to a single sustained note. Heavy, tense, unresolved. Voiceover. Whisper. He wasn't angry. He was already planning exactly how this would end. Officer Bradley drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near his radio. Malcolm sat in the back, cuffed, calm, not protesting, not pleading, just quiet, too quiet for Bradley's comfort. "So," the officer finally said, glancing at Malcolm through the rearview mirror, "you really expect me to believe you're the mayor?" Malcolm looked up, voice even. "I don't expect you to believe anything. I expected you to ask before assuming." Bradley smirked. "People pretend to be all kinds of things these days. Doctors, lawyers, mayors, I guess." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "Is that why you didn't read me my rights?" Bradley's smirk faded, just for a second. Then he turned the volume up on the police radio, as if to drown out the accountability. The cruiser pulled into the precinct parking lot. Malcolm scanned the building, brick, steel, glass. He'd been here before, just not in handcuffs. Bradley opened the back door. "Watch your head, Mayor." Inside, the front desk officer looked up, startled. "You bringing someone in?" Bradley nodded. Caught him walking around Hillcrest. Suspicious. No clear reason for being there. Malcolm cleared his throat. "I was walking to City Hall." The desk officer blinked. "Wait, is this..." Bradley cut in quickly. "Just book him. I'll file the report later." Malcolm sat quietly in a holding area. The cuffs were finally off, but the disrespect lingered like smoke. He looked at the clock. 9:13 a.m. He was now officially late for the meeting he was supposed to lead. Back, in the station hallway, whispers began. "Is that him?" "I think that's the mayor." No way. One officer discreetly pulled up a photo online. Another stepped into the watch commander's office. Within 5 minutes, Captain Rodriguez stormed out. Latino, early 50s, a man who'd seen too much and smiled too little. He marched straight into the holding area and locked eyes on Malcolm. His face went pale. Mayor Hayes. Malcolm stood slowly. Captain. Why are you here in cuffs? Malcolm didn't answer. He didn't need to. Rodriguez turned to the desk. Who brought him in? Bradley, one officer muttered. Rodriguez's voice sharpened like, Steele, get him in here now. Back in the hallway, Officer Bradley strutted in like he owned the place, until he saw Malcolm, standing, arms crossed. Completely free. Bradley stopped cold. Rodriguez stepped forward. Officer Bradley, care to explain why the mayor of this city is standing in my holding cell? Bradley's lips parted, but no sound came out. Music drops to a single note. Cold and sharp like a courtroom gavel. Voiceover whisper. He thought he'd cuffed a nobody, but he'd just put the whole department on trial. Is this a joke? Bradley finally muttered. This man was acting suspicious, walking in a residential area where he didn't belong. He refused to cooperate. Captain Rodriguez didn't flinch. You put the mayor of Crest Hill in handcuffs, without probable cause, without Miranda rights, and you dragged him into this station like a trophy. Bradley's face flushed. I didn't recognize him. Rodriguez leaned in, voice cold. You didn't try to. Malcolm stood silent, not gloating, not angry, just tired. Officer Bradley, he said calmly. You looked me in the face, heard me speak, saw my ID, and still decided I didn't belong. Bradley looked away. Rodriguez exhaled. Mayor Hayes, would you like to press formal charges? Malcolm shook his head. Not today, but this won't stay inside this building. Rodriguez nodded. Understood. He turned to Bradley. You're suspended. Effective immediately. Internal Affairs will contact you before noon. Give me your badge and gun. The room went still. Bradley hesitated, then unhooked the badge from his chest, laid it on the desk, removed his holster, placed it beside the badge, walked out, not like a man, but like a shadow of one. Rodriguez turned back to Malcolm. I'm sorry. Malcolm looked him in the eye. I don't want your apology. I want your department to stop confusing power with permission. Later that day, Malcolm returned to City Hall. The staff stood as he entered, more tense than usual. Mr. Mayor, he held up a hand. Let's get to work. No drama, just direction. But before the meeting began, Malcolm pulled his assistant aside. Schedule a press conference. I'm going to tell the whole city what happened today. She paused. Are you sure? That's national headline material. He nodded. Good. Because this time the headlines will speak the truth. Music builds slowly, turning into a confident, slow march, like the sound of justice walking in with its sleeves rolled up. Voiceover whisper. He didn't demand revenge. He demanded reckoning. The press room at City Hall hadn't been this packed in years. Cameras lined the back wall. Every major local outlet was there, some national names too. The room buzzed, rumors flying faster than the facts. Did the mayor really get arrested? Was it racial profiling? Are heads going to roll? No one had answers until the door opened and Mayor Malcolm Hayes walked in. No bodyguards, no entourage, just him. In a tailored gray suit, calm, measured, unshakable. He stepped up to the podium, adjusted the mic, took a breath, and began. Yesterday morning, I was detained by a Crest Hill police officer while walking to work. I was not asked for clarification. I was not given a reason. I was not read my rights. I was, however, handcuffed and humiliated. The room froze. Pens stopped. Cameras zoomed in. I was treated not like a citizen, not like a neighbor, not like a public servant, but like a threat. He let the silence speak, then continued. Let me be clear. This isn't just about me. This is about a system that grants power without requiring accountability. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Mayor, are you saying this was racial profiling? Malcolm looked directly at her. I'm saying if I had been a white man in that same neighborhood, walking that same street, in that same suit, we wouldn't be having this press conference. Another voice jumped in. Will Officer Bradley. Terminated? That decision, Malcolm said firmly, is up to internal affairs, but I will say this. Consequences are necessary. Silence is not an option. He looked into the camera now, not at the press, at the people. To every black man who's ever been pulled over for fitting the description, to every woman who's been followed through a store, to every child who's been taught to keep their hands visible at all times, I see you, and this city hears you now. Applause started softly, from the back, then grew. Not everyone clapped, but enough did. Enough to say, this was different. Malcolm stepped back from the mic. Didn't wait for more questions. Just turned and walked out. His message wasn't a plea, it was a promise. Music swells. A rising mix of piano and low brass like something righteous quietly rising from the ground up. Voiceover whisper. He didn't speak to be applauded. He spoke to be remembered. By the end of the day, Malcolm's speech had been viewed 2.1 million times. By morning, it had doubled. Mayor Malcolm walking while black. Justice in Crest Hill. The hashtags were everywhere. News anchors debated policy. Podcasts dissected the deeper issue. Twitter exploded with outrage, support, and stories, too many stories, of similar moments. My dad got cuffed for reaching into his glove box. They said I was loitering outside my own house. This is why we don't walk alone at night, or even during the day. Crest Hill was on the map, but not for its architecture, not for its schools, not for its charm. This time it was on the map for something else. Unspoken bias caught on camera. Meanwhile, back at the police precinct, internal affairs was in motion. Every officer on duty that day was being interviewed. Body cam footage reviewed. Dash cam audio transcribed. And Officer Bradley? He was under full suspension pending investigation, but he wasn't quiet. A leaked email hit the press, a half-hearted apology from Bradley. I regret how the situation unfolded. My intentions were to protect the neighborhood, not offend anyone. The backlash was swift. One local columnist responded, "This is not about intention, it's about instinct, and who we see as a threat." But Malcolm, he wasn't feeding the fire. He stayed focused on policy, on progress, on the bigger picture. He sat with the city council, presented proposals, mandatory anti-bias training, a community oversight board with real authority, funding for programs that prevent these incidents, not just clean them up. Some council members were resistant. "Mayor, this feels like an overreaction to a single event." Malcolm looked them dead in the eye. "If it happened to me, the highest elected official in this city, what do you think happens to people who don't wear this suit?" That line would be quoted on posters, printed on banners, spray-painted across bridges. Because Malcolm didn't just walk into power, he walked with purpose. Music swells with slow, powerful strings, not sad, not angry, but rising. Voiceover whisper. He wasn't just fighting for justice, he was designing it, brick by brick. He let the silence speak, then continued, "Let me be clear. This isn't just about me. This is about a system that grants power without requiring accountability." Joe. Reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Mayor, are you saying this was racial profiling?" Malcolm looked directly at her. "I'm saying if I had been a white man in that same neighborhood, walking that same street, in that same suit, we wouldn't be having this press conference." Another voice jumped in. "Will Officer Bradley be terminated?" "That decision," Malcolm said firmly, "is up to internal affairs. But I will say this. Consequences are necessary. Silence is not an option." He looked into the camera now, not at the press, at the people. To every black man who's ever been pulled over for fitting the description, to every woman who's been followed through a store, to every child who's been taught to keep their hands visible at all times. I see you, and this city hears you now. Applause started softly, from the back, then grew. Not everyone clapped, but enough did. Enough to say, this was different. Malcolm stepped back from the mic, didn't wait for more questions, just turned and walked out. His message wasn't a plea, it was a promise. Music swells, a rising mix of piano and low brass like something righteous quietly rising from the ground up. Voice-over whisper, he didn't speak to be applauded, he spoke to be remembered. Not everyone clapped for Malcolm Hayes. Behind the scenes there were whispers, closed-door meetings, raised eyebrows. Some called him too loud, others too political. One councilman said, he's using this arrest for personal attention. That councilman was the same one who'd never said a word when Malcolm proposed housing reform 6 months earlier. But Malcolm didn't flinch. He'd been in rooms where people pretended to smile while loading their pockets with silence. This wasn't new. At the next city council meeting, he presented a motion to create the Crest Hill Civilian Review Board, a group with full authority to investigate police misconduct, independent of the department. The room went cold. One member cleared her throat. Mr. Mayor, this would put civilian hands into law enforcement procedures. Malcolm nodded. Exactly. What if the board becomes biased? Malcolm looked her in the eye. You mean like the system already is? The vote didn't pass that day, but the seed had been planted. Community leaders, faith organizations, youth groups, they rallied behind it. They saw something Malcolm's critics didn't, a leader who wasn't trying to burn the system. He was trying to rebuild it. Meanwhile, Internal Affairs concluded their investigation, and the footage, it said everything. Malcolm calmly handed over his ID, politely explained who he was, stood silent as he was cuffed, never resisted, never lied. But Officer Bradley insulted him, dismissed his answers, mocked his voice, and, perhaps worst of all, smiled when the cuffs clicked. The department had no choice. Bradley was terminated. The chief released a statement. There is no room in this city for those who confuse skin color with suspicion. Some cheered, some said it wasn't enough. But Malcolm, he stayed focused, because his goal wasn't punishment, it was transformation. That night, Malcolm spoke at a high school town hall. He stood in front of a group of black teens, not in a suit, but in jeans and sneakers. When I was your age, he said, I thought power was about being feared. But it's not. It's about being heard and helping others be heard too. A boy in the back raised his hand. What if they still don't listen? Malcolm smiled. Then you speak louder, not with your voice, but with your work. Music. Swells, uplifting piano over a slow beat, like the sound of a heart rebuilding hope. Voice-over whisper. They shut him down in the street, but now they have to hear him, in every room where change begins. The city's annual Civic Leadership Summit wasn't usually exciting. Suits, speeches, shrimp cocktails. That was the rhythm. But this year, it was different. This year, people showed up for one name on the program, Mayor Malcolm Hayes. The ballroom was packed. Not just politicians, but students, mothers, barbers, teachers, store owners, people who'd never sat in these rooms before. Malcolm walked to the podium without notes, no teleprompter, no applause request, just presence. He looked out at the crowd, let the silence settle, then spoke. A few weeks ago, I was arrested for walking to work. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't running. I wasn't armed. I was just walking. And for some people in this country, that's still a crime. The room went still. What happened to me isn't new. It's just now. It's undeniable. And I'm not sharing this because I want pity. I'm sharing it because silence is what lets it keep happening. He stepped closer to the mic. Let me say it plain. I'm not asking for change. I'm building it. And I'm not here to make anyone comfortable. I'm here to make this city better, for the people who were never invited to the table to begin with. Then he paused, took one slow breath. You don't fix broken systems with fancy words. You fix them with action, policy, and people who refuse to give up. The applause didn't come all at once. It began with one person, then another. Then the room stood. Everyone. Standing. Not clapping because they had to, but because they couldn't stay seated anymore. That night, news anchors called it the speech of the year. Clips flooded social media. High schools replayed it in classrooms. Churches quoted it from pulpits. Parents printed it out and stuck it to refrigerators. But Malcolm, he went home, alone, sat in his living room, took off his jacket and whispered to himself, now the real work begins. Music builds, powerful, layered, deep, like the heartbeat of a city finally waking up. Voiceover whisper. He didn't just break the silence. He made sure it echoed. The city's annual Civic Leadership Summit wasn't usually exciting. Suits, speeches, shrimp cocktails. That was the rhythm. But this year, it was different. This year, people showed up for one name on the program, Mayor Malcolm Hayes. The ballroom was packed. Not just politicians, but students, mothers, barbers, teachers, store owners, people who'd never sat in these rooms before. Malcolm walked to the podium without notes, no teleprompter, no applause request, just presence. He looked out at the crowd, let the silence settle, then spoke. A few weeks ago, I was arrested for walking to work. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't running. I wasn't armed. I was just walking. And for some people in this country, that's still a crime. The room went still. What happened to me isn't new. It's just now. It's undeniable. And I'm not sharing this because I want pity. I'm sharing it because silence is what lets it keep happening. He stepped closer to the mic. Let me say it plain. I'm not asking for change. I'm building it. And I'm not here to make anyone comfortable. I'm here to make this city better for the people who were never invited to the table to begin with. Then he paused, took one slow breath. You don't fix broken systems with fancy words. You fix them with action, policy, and people who refuse to give up. The applause didn't come all at once. It began with one person, then another. Then the room stood. Everyone. Standing. Not clapping because they had to, but because they couldn't stay seated anymore. That night, news anchors called it the speech of the year. Clips flooded social media. High schools replayed it in classrooms. Churches quoted it from pulpits. Parents printed it out and stuck it to refrigerators. But Malcolm, he went home, alone, sat in his living room, took off his jacket and whispered to himself, now the real work begins. Music builds, powerful, layered, deep, like the heartbeat of a city finally waking up. Voiceover whisper. He didn't just break the silence. He made sure it echoed. The Monday after Malcolm's speech felt different. The city wasn't fixed, but it was listening. A local barbershop played the speech on repeat, the part where Malcolm said, I'm not asking for change, I'm building it. A fourth grade teacher asked her class, what does courage look like? One student raised his hand and said, like our mayor. A coffee shop wrote on their chalkboard sign, we stand with Mayor Hayes, walk anywhere, be seen everywhere. And at City Hall, the council that once resisted him was now requesting his input, not because of pressure, but because they realized he had more than a voice. He had the people, the Crest Hill Civilian Review Board. The one they blocked weeks ago, it passed, unanimously. Not everyone was happy. There were still critics, still angry voices on late-night talk radio. But Malcolm didn't fight them. He outworked them. He met with precinct captains, hosted community, listening sessions, funded mentorship programs, brought in experts to revamp police training from the inside out. One day, during a school visit, a young boy asked, Mayor Hayes, do you forgive the officer who arrested you? Malcolm paused. The room was quiet. Then he said, forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself, but accountability is a gift you give to others. He doesn't need my forgiveness. He needs to understand the harm and help fix it. Later that night, he received a letter. No return address, no signature. Inside was just one sentence handwritten, "You deserved better, I'm trying to be better." He read it twice, then folded it and placed it in his desk drawer, next to a framed photo of him walking, hands cuffed, expression calm. Because that photo was no longer a symbol of shame, it was a reminder of where the fight started and why it could never stop. Music lifts, with slow triumph, strings, piano, soft choir hum beneath it all. Voiceover whisper. He didn't rebuild trust with headlines. He did it one heart, one room, one policy at a time. Election day in Crest Hill wasn't usually this emotional, but this time, it felt personal. People weren't just voting for a mayor, they were voting for a message. Lines wrapped around libraries. Church parking lots turned into civic sanctuaries. Elderly women in wheelchairs wore "I voted" stickers like war medals. First-time voters brought their kids. Teenagers in hoodies handed out water bottles. A man with a walker whispered, "I walked slow, but I showed up." Because this election wasn't just about the next 4 years. It was about what happens when a black man gets arrested for no reason and rises anyway. It was about what happens when power gets used to open doors, not guard them. The results came in after dark. Malcolm sat at home, no crowd, just family, and the silence of waiting. Then the call came. "Malcolm, you didn't just win. You shattered the record. 73% of the vote, every single voting district, including the ones that once said he was too bold, too much, too black." He walked onto the stage that night not as a man reclaiming power, but as a man redefining what it looks like. He raised one hand and waved, didn't say much, just 5 words. "Thank you for seeing me." The crowd lost it. Applause, tears, people hugging strangers, not because it was political, but because it was personal. In the back of the crowd, a young police officer stood watching, helmet under his arm, badge shining under the lights. He joined the force last month because of the mayor. Next to him, a boy no older than 8 clutched his mom's hand and asked, "Is that really the man they arrested?" His mom smiled. "Yes, baby. And now he's the one running the whole city." Music swells, a blend of piano and gospel undertones, steady, rising, joyful. Voiceover whisper. He was cuffed on the sidewalk. Now he's carried by a city. Not because he demanded power, but because he proved what it's for. It was 6:43 a.m., same neighborhood, same sidewalk, same Malcolm Hayes. Only this time, no police cruiser crept behind him. Just peace, just purpose. He still walked to work, not because he had to, but because he chose to. As he passed the house where it all happened, he nodded to the front porch. A white woman sitting there smiled at him. "Morning, Mr. Mayor." He smiled back. "Morning, Ms. Ellison." No fear, no tension, just neighbors. At City Hall, the front doors opened automatically. Inside, a new mural now greeted every visitor. It didn't show Malcolm in a suit, or shaking hands, or standing at a podium. It showed him in handcuffs, standing tall, eyes forward. And behind him, the entire city, blurred, diverse, walking forward together. The title, From Cuffed to Trusted. Malcolm stood before it every morning, just for a moment. Not to remember pain, but to remember why he kept showing up. Later that day, during a mentorship meeting, a young black intern asked, "Mr. Hayes, do you ever regret not fighting back that day?" Malcolm paused, then said, "No, because sometimes dignity is louder than rage, and sometimes the best way to fight is to build something no one can tear down." He looked out the window at the city below, children crossing the street safely, officers helping an elderly man carry groceries, a muralist finishing a piece of public art with the word unity across it. Malcolm took a breath, let it out slow, then turned back to the room. "All right," he said, smiling. "Let's get back to work." Final music swells, warm, uplifting, Cinematic resolution. Voiceover. Whisper, closing line. They saw a black man walking. He showed them a leader rising, and the city followed his steps. Fade out.